Thank you, and welcome to Sally's inaugural. Thank you. It's good to see so many people here, and it's great to have people through the magic of the internet there as well. Hello, the other side of that camera. Hello to you. As you all know, Sally is wonderful, and that's why we're all here. And we're going to hear some great stuff about the fantastic work that she's been engaged in. And she's just well known to us all, and obviously much more well known to us than her distant cousin, Tom. No, seriously. There aren't actually, I was preparing for this in the way that I always do, which is in an entirely kind of inept manner. And I was looking to see for other famous Hankses other than the one that we have here. And there aren't many, you know, Tom Hanks's 83 films notwithstanding or whatever. There aren't. And Hanks as a name is interesting because it comes from the Old Norse for eagle, anchor. For eagle, apparently. And so the blood of Vikings courses through Sally's veins, as any of you that have ever crossed her or her students will know. So I was looking for other famous Hankses that might sort of give us some idea in the past, that might give us some idea of Sally and where she gets her immense and brilliant drive and fantastic achievement from. And I found this in the Oxford Journal from 1793. On Wednesday last, James Hanks, a labourer of this city, was committed to our castle on suspicion of burglaring, entering the lodgings of the principal of New Inn Hall, so stealing from universities, not a good thing, and stealing from there a piece of Irish cloth, 3 guineas in gold, 2 pairs of silver buckle shoes, which may have been passed down through the family into the ones that we see today, 4 silver spoons and divers other articles. The said James Hanks was further charged with stealing from a dwelling house of Samuel Denton a silver and metal watch. 7 days later, there was another report. Last Tuesday, James Hanks, under confinement in the Castle Jail at Oxford, found means to make his escape from the felons' building in that prison by breaking through the grating that enclosed the day room and getting over the boundary wall. A reward of 10 guineas has been offered for his capture. So there we see the creativity that Sally has and the ability, the ingenuity that she shows in getting out of things as well. So I'm extraordinarily pleased that Sally is a member of our faculty, and I'm immensely pleased, again, that she has been promoted to professor, extraordinarily well-deserved. And, so what we're going to see today will show kind of her Viking ferocity in terms of taking ideas and following them through and finding out things and doing stuff with it in order to make things better. Now, the Vikings weren't famous for making things better, but Sally is absolutely there. And that ingenuity and that ability to be able to solve problems and deal with them that James Hanks showed when escaping from Oxford Jail is absolutely at the core of what Sally does. So I'm really, really pleased that we're all here today. And I'm going to hand over now to Chris, who will be much more sensible than I was.
Thank you, Shubi. So, ladies, gentlemen, family and friends, I'm delighted to be welcoming you to the inaugural professorial lecture of Sally Hanks, Professor of Primary Care Dentistry. Sally was one of the first members of the team I met when I first joined the school. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy to watch Sally pass through many landmarks in her career, and this evening being the latest. Sally qualified from Bristol Dental School in 1993 and spent the first 10 years of her career working full-time in primary care dentistry. This includes roles in the NHS, private practice, hospital, and as a civilian dental officer with the Royal Navy. The next 5-year phase saw her career develop by working with special care patients and furthering her interest in expertise in behavioural management strategies, including gaining advanced diploma in hypnosis and stress management in 2010. Sally started her academic journey as a restorative clinical lecturer at Bristol Dental School, and I promised not to make a joke, but I couldn't help myself. But you've done well despite that, Sally. So very well done indeed. So that's just behaved myself otherwise. And then moving to Peninsula 12 years ago, almost to the day. And quickly at the dental school progressed to final year lead for professionalism and gained her postgraduate certificate of academic practice. Sally's gone on to lead teaching and learning in the dental school while at the University of Plymouth. Sally was awarded her PhD in medical education related to leadership in primary care dental practice. Sally's a principal fellow of the Higher Education Academy, a position held by very, very few dentists, so a great achievement, a great honour to have done that, and a fellow of the Faculty of Dental Trainers at the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. Sally was an inaugural chair of the UK Council of the Dental Teachers of Professionalism and is an invited member on the steering group for Professionalism Community of Practice Association with the dental educators in Europe. Sally has a leading and active role on the Education Committee of Dental Schools Council in the UK and Ireland, is involved in research funded by the General Dental Council and Health Education England, and her educational advisory roles reach as far as La Trobe University in Australia. I'm delighted to present Professor Sally Hanks and her inaugural professorial lecture entitled Beyond Exams, Education That Empowers. And then one final bit of housekeeping before I do. At the end of the lecture, we're going to be using Slido, so please make sure you've got the Slido. It's hashtag 293441. The questions will come through and I'll present the questions to Sally at the end. So without further ado, Sally, I'm delighted and proud to be presenting you and look forward to your lecture.
Thank you very much, Shubi. Thank you very much, Chris. And just to say, I will be asking you a bit of audience participation. Not sure whether that's a really good idea or not, but we'll find out. And we'll be using Slido for that. So please do have your devices at the ready, and it will be the same code. And it will be very obvious when I'm wanting your participation through Slido. So thank you very, very much for coming out on a Thursday evening, and thank you to everyone at home that's watching. It may be the call of free refreshments afterwards, a free glass of wine on the University of Plymouth, and for those of you at home, I hope you may have something right now while you're watching. I'm not sure if now's the time to tell Shubi that actually my family come from Oxford. I might think about that one. So welcome. My talk this evening is called Beyond Exams, Education That Empowers. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is how we really should and can be preparing our students for the real world of dental practice when they leave us. It's way more about exams. It's way more than assessment. What I'll be doing is talking a little bit about some of the areas that I've been involved in teaching and research through the last 12 years. As Chris said, 12 years last week that I joined Peninsula, and also a little bit of information about my clinical work, and then maybe unusually towards the end, a little bit of a personal reflection on some additional things and additional ways that being prepared for practice, individuals can be supported. Funnily enough, this evening, I am going to be talking a lot about dentistry because that's what I do and that's what I know most about. But the conversations around preparedness for practice really can cross boundaries. So it may be that people here from other healthcare professions, you may find that a lot of this is absolutely relevant, and I'd be very interested to hear from you, afterwards, which parts particularly are relevant. But also crossing into non-healthcare professions as well. Preparedness for practice is not only related to healthcare. My aim is to reach everyone in the audience. There's a very eclectic mix of people in the audience tonight, across the health professions and non-healthcare professions, and people at home, friends and family. So I would like everyone to go away having taken something from this evening. And I guess that's my excuse if I don't sound very professorial. I know it's a professorial lecture, but my aim is to reach everyone. So that's my get-out clause. Earlier this year, I was very fortunate to be invited to lunch with the Vice-Chancellor of the university when I'd been given my professorship, and she said to me, why is it that dentists always have gory pictures in their presentations and they never warn you that so here's the warning, gore alert, okay? And here we are. But I hear your reaction, and this is the reaction that our students may have when first seeing someone suffering from conditions like this. But more than that, this is what There's someone suffering on the end of these pictures, someone experiencing this, and that is why being prepared for practice is so important. It's not just about being able to use the drill in the right way or understand how to fix it. It's being able to recognise that there's someone maybe in pain, who's anxious, who's frightened, who feels guilty or angry or upset, and you have to be able to deal with that as well. You know, if you get a little one like this, you know, 7 or 8 years old, that's not going to feel comfortable, but at the same time, their parents might be feeling terribly guilty. They might be feeling terribly upset. So there's an awful lot that goes around with being prepared for practice that's much more than technical skills of drilling and being able to use technical equipment. Although I have to say, working in a very dark, wet place in a mirror and having to work in fractions of millimetres is not always easy, and technical skills are hugely, hugely important and shouldn't be underrated. These are some pictures from some extreme dentistry, if you like, and some years ago I was fortunate enough to accompany some students to Peru, and I think this is the boat that we use. So this is the Amazon River in Peru, and we took our boat and we did medicine and dentistry. It's a charity, and we provided medical and dental care to remote Amazonian tribes who are not accessible by road. So these villages are only accessible by boat. The only care they get is when the boat comes around. But this is about being prepared for practice, because look at this little one. Absolutely petrified, never seen a white person before, didn't understand the language, we have to use an interpreter, surrounded by a kit that they've never seen before. You've got to be able to manage that, you've got to be prepared for that. It's much more than just technical and proficiency. Sticking a needle in someone's face is actually a horrible thing to do, and it's not very nice to have it done to you. You have to be able to do that with many more skills than just knowing exactly where to put it, although, as I say, that is very, very important. I'm going to illustrate my points about preparedness for practice by something that we probably all understand, and that's cooking. And I hope that everyone is familiar with the Masterchef concept. So Masterchef, if you don't know, is a television programme where unsuspecting cooks put themselves through a competition, a knockout competition, and the cooking and the rounds get a bit harder and harder as they go through. But I'm going to start off with thinking about spaghetti bolognese. You probably have a different dish, but spaghetti bolognese, the dish that I can cook on a Friday night without really thinking about it, glass of wine in one hand, music playing, quite relaxing. Friends and family might say, you know, just do your spaghetti bolognese self when we come around on a Friday night, that's lovely. It might not be quite the same every time, but it's always good, it's always tasty. It's pretty straightforward to make, and I can be very relaxed when I'm making it. My question to you as an audience, you've probably got your own dishes that you can make on a Friday night. What skills do you need to make these dishes? If you go to Slido, it'd be really great to hear what you have to say. 1 or 2 words of the skills that you might need to cook your go-to dish on a Friday night. And apparently, like magic, it's going to come up on the screen. And you can do this at home as well. So it'd be great if you could play along at home as well. Let's see what you have to say. Garlic, excellent. Great. And the great thing about this is the more people that write the same thing, the bigger the word gets. So you're all talking about good timing. So there's obviously some cooks among you. Good knife skills, be able to chop and dice, red wine. I think that's everything, isn't it? Not just spaghetti bolognese. Patience, a recipe. Yeah, knowledge, people to eat with, yeah, a bit of organisation, a toaster. Yeah, it's interesting. I've never used a toaster for my spaghetti bolognese, but thank you very much. Brilliant. Good produce, have ingredients. Yeah, bit of multitasking, artistic flair. Yeah, we've all got a bit of that in our spaghetti bolognese. That's why it's never the same twice, isn't it? Brilliant. A cooker. Yeah, absolutely. Taste. Brilliant. My glasses, yeah. I can do it without my glasses. That's also probably why it's never the same twice. Patience, yeah, recipe, brilliant. Thank you very much. And look, 41 people have helped us out with that. So really good. I'm going to ask you just to sort of remember that For Deliveroo, interesting. I'm going to ask you just to remember that. Hang on to some of those skills that you talked about in a minute, because we're just going to think on a little bit further. So that's your Friday night spaghetti bolognese. We're going to think about your Masterchef moment now. So you take your spaghetti bolognese, but instead of cooking it on a Friday night for a couple of people, now you're in a team of 10 chefs in the Masterchef kitchen, and you're not cooking for 2 or 3 people, you are cooking for an entire factory workforce. You're not quite sure how to use the equipment, you're not entirely sure what the ingredients are, you're not even sure what that is, but you've got to do something with it. People have a slightly different expectation and wondering how idea of how to do things. Tempers get a bit frayed and it all gets a little bit much and emotions run high. But you get your spaghetti bolognese out, the workforce gets fed. Unfortunately, they don't like it very much. It doesn't taste very much like it does on a Friday night at home. And the judges aren't very pleased with you either, and it is time to leave the competition. So the question is, what additional skills might you need other than cooking for your Masterchef moment? Again, just a couple of words on Slido. What additional skills might you need? Fantastic. Communication, teamwork, resilience, working well under pressure, yeah. Inspiration, yeah. Sense of humour, yeah, definitely. Adaptability, bravery, fantastic. I like the professionalism. We're going to talk a bit about that in a minute. So that would be. We've got our professional leads here as well, so we'll be taking notes. Brilliant. Look at this. You've got some great ideas. Deliberate practice. That's a speed. Yeah, brilliant. Negotiation. Yeah. Leadership experience, a good one. Able to respond to change. Fantastic. It's like you've written my talk for me. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Again, just bear these in mind as we go through a little bit later this evening, because I'll be returning to some of these ideas. But you can see that what you've put as these additional skills are slightly higher level than the ones you needed for cooking. They're all sort of on a different level. They're slightly something a bit more than you need for your Friday night cooking. And that is really what preparedness for practice is all about. It's just that something more than just those technical skills. Could you click on the slide, please, Alistair? Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Thank you. Working in dental practice, maybe working anywhere, can feel like having a Masterchef moment every day. And we've got enough dentists I can see in the room that absolutely can guarantee that. And this is why we need to prepare our students for practice. So I'm going to talk about 4 areas that I've been involved in the last few years. Some of education training, some research, and some clinical practice that I think underpin preparedness for practice in our graduates. And they are professionalism, leadership, capability, and patient-centred care. And I've put hypnosis in that patient-centred care because that's one of the particular skills and expertise that I have that help me to work with especially challenging groups to deliver patient-centred care. And the philosophy of hypnosis enables me to deliver a patient and student-centred approach and a colleague-centred approach in everything that I do. And you will notice the thread joining all these things together is the importance, the fundamental importance of each of us as individuals. And that is going to come out very strongly through this evening, and how we empower and support each of us as individuals to reach our best potential. So I'm going to start with leadership, and maybe some of you know this, maybe you don't, but there are over 350,000 definitions of leadership in the literature. That's quite a lot. I haven't read them all. I have read quite a lot of them. None of them directly relate to dentistry. In fact, many of them don't relate to any particular context directly in any healthcare setting. Many of them are conceptual, abstracted, and have to be adapted to the particular setting that they are achieved in. And so I thought, well, there's a big gap in the literature. I'll do a PhD on it. So here we are. Here's my thesis. As in all good qualitative research, it's huge, and it holds open a door very, very effectively. What I did with my PhD was I thought, well, if I want to know what leadership looks like and how it works in dental practice, where do I go? dental practice. And it's here that I have to pay tribute to a number of people. First of all, my 3 supervisors, 2 of whom are here tonight and 1 of whom I know is here online, Debbie Cotton, Lucy Spurt and Sam Reagan de Beer. Thank you. And I also have to pay tribute to all the participants because it took some very brave dentists to be recorded doing their daily work. And without them, we wouldn't have this new knowledge. And I don't know how many of them are here this evening, online or in person, but I have to thank them very much for participating in this research. And I used really robust qualitative research because in dentistry, qualitative research is a little bit unusual. There wasn't a single statistic in my PhD thesis. That's quite unusual. Probably good for me, but quite unusual for dentistry. And so I had to underpin my research with really robust methodologies so that we could trust the findings. And I used particularly activity theory and video reflexive ethnography. And I am not, you might be pleased to know, going to talk about those in detail this evening, but I would say if anyone's particularly interested later on to know more, very happy for you to contact me. The really important thing about this research was that it was the voice of participants that were heard in the knowledge. So I co-created the knowledge that we find. So the knowledge that I'm going to share with you this evening comes from the real world of dentistry and dental practice, a bottom-up approach, if you like, to changing policy and process. So what did I find? One of the things I find, this is a timeline of leadership, and you'll see we go from leaders, this is way back sort of in the early 1900s, and we've moved away from that, we'll be pleased to know, through a number of different styles to this new, what we call engaging, transformational, authentic leadership. And these are much more about relationships and behaviours than the person. And this is really, really good for introverts and those of us who may not feel comfortable with being a leader. We don't talk about leaders anymore, we talk about leadership. Because the person that does the leadership is the most appropriate person at the time. If you're in a group of people, who's got the most appropriate skills? They will be the one taking the leadership role. Leadership is absolutely context dependent as well. We can't just go out and find leadership, so it will change in any given situation. And these new theories at the end in the 2010s plus, all linked with very high emotional intelligence. And this is something that we need to be supporting in our students so that they can go out and perform their duties effectively in practice. We've got 2 main definitions of emotional intelligence that are important because, again, emotional intelligence is a huge literature all of its own. The first is about paying attention to using, understanding and managing emotions of yourself and others. And the other definition that's really important is about demonstrating self-awareness, self-regulation, self-efficacy, and having effective social skills and self-motivation. Hugely important things underpinning leadership that perhaps we wouldn't have thought about if we hadn't gone and gone into and looked at this in primary care dental practice. The other thing I found that there are 3 main activities that are associated in dental practice a dentist does, maybe other clinicians as well. First of all, they look after patients, they perform patient care. The second activity is that they run the surgery that they're working in. And the third activity that underpins leadership is running the practice. And these 3 activities work together all through their working day to underpin their leadership. And there were 6 considerations that we found that were fundamental, 6 fundamental concepts to leadership in dentists. 3 of them were external to the individual and 3 were internal to the individual. The external concepts, the first one is about leadership level, and this is about whether you work in the Department of Health at a political level, so the decisions you're making have a much wider impact and influence, all the way down through if you're a practice owner, making decisions at practice or ward level, whether you're making decisions at hospital level or whether it's a smaller team just in the surgery, or even all the way down to personal decisions that are only impacting on you as an individual. And which level you're working at has a huge impact on the leadership. The next is the community of practice. Now, this just isn't a practice with a dentist. It's very context specific. It's the dentist in the practice. The same dentist will have different behaviours to be effective in a different dental practice. So leadership is all about the individual dentist in the specific community of practice of their dental practice. And the third external element is a personal context or position, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The three elements of leadership internal to the individual are about identity, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well momentarily. Relationships, hugely important in dental practice. I don't know if any dentists here or at home want to guess at what the most important relationship in a dental practice is relating to leadership. No one wants to shout out, I guess. Go on, someone wants to have a go. It's with your nurse, and that is the most important relationship. And there's a rule that came out that when the patient is in the chair, the nurse looks after the dentist. And when the patient is not in the room, the dentist looks after the nurse. That's a really great reciprocity, and we need to get that right to have effective practice. The third, dentists have to have a relationship with lots of people, definitely with patients, with the whole practice community and the external community. So being able to create, develop and maintain successful relationships is fundamental to being prepared for practice. And that, again, is something that we really need to support and help our students to create and deliver. The third internal element is capability and flexibility. And again, we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a moment. So I'm going to go back to this personal context or position. What does this mean? When a dentist is working in practice, they're working as three different contexts all at the same time. Dentist as individual, dentist as clinician, and dentist as business person. And I'll give you an example, and this came directly out of my research. One of the children that you saw in the earlier pictures, or from the gore picture, comes into the surgery. A little 6-year-old with abscesses, crying in pain, lots of tooth decay, broken teeth. As an individual, the dentist thinks, I feel sad, I feel upset. I actually feel a bit angry that this has been allowed to happen to this young person. And emotionally, I'm having an emotional reaction to this situation. As a clinician, they're thinking, okay, what do I have to do? How can I educate to make this better and make sure it doesn't happen again? What do I actually do physically to help? How do I get this person out of pain? What materials do I use? How many teeth do I have to take out, for example? As a business person, they may be thinking, how am I going to make money for my practice in the contract that I'm working in? Or alternatively, how's my reputation going to be for the practice? If I muck this up, because this little one goes to the local school, everyone's going to know how I've dealt with this. And you can see that those three positions have different thought processes. And when a dentist is working in practice, if those three positions are in harmony with one another, then great, fine, everything's hunky-dory. But if those three positions, even if one of them is out of kilter, it can set up stress and anxiety in the dentist and the clinician, and actually cause a decrease in efficacy of the leadership behaviours. And as we know, leadership is involved with running the surgery, running the practice, and patient care. So if a dentist isn't aware of these personal positions and is feeling stressed because they're in conflict, then patient care will suffer. So again, empowering individuals to understand this and help them to manage those internal conflicts, hugely important. And this is my final Hanks framework of leadership in dentistry. You can see the 6 elements. So the leadership level sets the scene. If you're making a decision at individual level, it will have a different impact than if you're working in the Department of Health, for example. And then all the other 5 elements work together. They're all interconnected, and the relationships between them are reciprocal. One impacts on the other, and there's a reciprocal reaction. And that is what supports the dentist's leadership and supports patient care in dental practice. I said I'd talk a bit about identity, and that brings us nicely onto the area of professionalism. Oh, can I just have my slide back? Sorry. So we are going to go to Slido. Alice is absolutely right. He's just beat me to it to a couple of seconds. So do go to Slido. And I'm going to ask you just to put in 3 words that mean or underpin or define professionalism for you. We've got a really eclectic audience here this evening from across healthcare and outside. It'd be really interesting to see what you come up with. Thank you, Alistair. If we can put the Slido back up, that would be great. Brilliant. And there's some really interesting things coming up here. And look at the variety of areas that different people think I love that honesty and integrity are coming out as nice big green words there. A lot of people thinking that's important. Knowledge, safe, amazing. Interestingly, how many of those relate to what you said about having a Masterchef moment and being prepared for practice? There's quite a lot of crossover here. So it's interesting how professionalism probably relates to preparedness for practice. And again, a lot of these are sort of higher level areas, much more difficult to teach and assess for than a particular skill. Kindness, respect, learning to improve loyalty. Wow, you're just having brilliant ideas about what professionalism is. I'm particularly proud of you all about honesty and integrity being the big words in the middle there. And again, just sort of keep these in mind as we go through the next few slides, because some of these are really difficult attributes. First of all, to identify in someone else. Secondly, to recognise in someone else. And certainly, they're very hard to teach, educate for, and assess. One of the things we have to remember is that we can never really understand what someone's thinking. We'll never know. We have to use behaviour as a proxy. And so it's lovely to think that someone's honest and they have empathy and they act with integrity and they're kind, etc. We don't know that. We only know if they do the right thing. So we sort of have to assume that they're doing the right things for the right reasons. And that's where we have to support people to do self-reflection and critical reflection so that they can work out for themselves. Thank you. We can go back to the PowerPoint now. So you can see the huge variety of words that you came up with just this evening, which is a brilliant piece of work. And as Chris said in his introduction, I founded a few years ago the UK Council for the Dental Teachers of Professionalism. So we are a group of educators from all the dental schools in the UK, and we talk about educating for professionalism, which is somewhat complex. And we realised that when we're talking about professionalism, we're often starting from a completely different starting point. And so we've recently published a paper just to say, maybe if we can start from here, we'll have a bit of a shared understanding so that our conversations can make a bit more sense when we're talking across boundaries or in different establishments or even in different healthcare professions. And what we found was that professionalism is described as an extraordinarily complex phenomenon which occupies an enigmatic presence within the healthcare community. And I wonder if this is why people sometimes call it soft skills or fluffy, because it's sort of easier, takes the sting out of its complexity a little bit. I don't think there's anything fluffy or soft about professionalism skills, educating for them, assessing for them, or having them and creating them. We have a lot of guidance, and these are just 3 dental documents that will be the same across all of healthcare, that sort of give you a list, if you like, that regulators say, this is what professionalism should be, this is how you should work as a professional. And this is from the General Dental Council. This is their 4 domains of learning. This blue circle here is clinical, and you can see the rest, communication, professionalism, and management and leadership. Such a crossover between these 3. As you've already pointed out in some of your preparedness for practice yourselves and some of the words you've used. But what we found that there were 6 areas that we can maybe start to consider having a shared understanding when we start a conversation. The first is trust. And that's not just trust between the individual dentist and their patient, that's a societal trust. We're a profession because society trusts us to be a profession. They trust us to self-regulate. They trust us to educate appropriately. The second is this idea of varying expectations. Look at the expectations that you had just tonight, a huge variety. And sometimes the expectations in one situation will be different to another. I mean, sometimes it's appropriate to go out in public in a bikini if you're on holiday, perhaps on a beach. Probably wouldn't be so acceptable this evening, for example. But varying expectations depending on context. And also, your patients will have varying expectations. It's really important to be able to recognise that. Professional identity formation, which I'm going to talk again, and that comes up again. It came up in leadership, comes up again here in professionalism. And this is an interesting one, this internal motivation of the practitioner to be professional. We'll never know. We'll never know what someone's motivation is. But we can, by proxy, and we can by encouraging self-reflection and critical analysis of events and feedback, maybe start to get an insight, or more importantly, enable learners and professionals themselves to gain an insight. In dentistry, there are certainly financial considerations, because dentistry you generally pay for now at the point of care. And as a culture, we're not used to that, because we're used to the NHS being able to just turn up and have care free at the point of care. And there's a lot of difficulty around that for dentistry. And the third one is this context dependence. And I come back to this: leadership context dependent, professionalism context dependent, because the individual person in their individual context is hugely important. It means that standardization and expecting everyone to always be the same is probably not appropriate, but more easy to assess, but much more but not really helpful to prepare for practice. And I was giving a talk a couple of weeks ago to some newly qualified dentists and dental foundation trainees, and I was giving a day on, they must have been fascinated, a whole day on leadership and professionalism, and then a bit of hypnosis in the afternoon. And one of them said to me, "I'm really glad you said this, because when I was at dental school," they weren't a Peninsula student before you start to worry, "I'm really glad you said this, because I feel that in professionalism, I was being expected to turn into a clone of everybody else. And that's absolutely not the point of professionalism or leadership. It's about celebrating individual. And it's about recognizing the impact, each of us recognizing the impact of our individual qualities on our context. Some will be really good, some may need some work." And my great friend and colleague, Hilary Neve, who's here this evening, and I wrote a paper recently about identity and professional identity formation. And we used this metaphor of the Tangram, which is a Chinese puzzle with 7 pieces, and they get put together in various ways to make different shapes. And we loosely based our paper on these Tangrams. And this is about professional identity formation. There will be some core central concepts that most of us have. And judging by what you said on your screen, honesty, integrity, probably are 2 of the core concepts we'd expect a professional to have. But we all put them together in a different way. And what we all are is the architect, designer, builder, and decorator of our own unique professional identity house. And probably most important, we are also the caretaker, because this is not a one-off build. This is a lifetime's work of review, renovation, maybe adding a conservatory. But you want to make sure the chimney isn't falling off. You want to make sure there's no ivy growing through the walls and pulling it down. It's a lifetime's work. And it's also really important to recognise that our personal identity, who we are, and our professional identity, maybe who we want to be or who we should be, sometimes don't align. And it's important to recognise that in the individual, because that as well can set up huge stress. If someone doesn't realise quite that actually who they are at work and the job they're doing is actually at odds with who they are as a person, that quiet stress can have huge impacts on their mental health. Carrying on with the Tangram metaphor, we often in education think about minimum standards of professionalism, and that as long as you're not unprofessional, it's okay. But we would argue that being professional is much more than not being unprofessional. So if we've got our minimum standards line, we can sometimes be below the line. And of course that needs picking up, it needs recognising, it needs an opportunity to reflect on what's gone wrong. Maybe are you missing your pink triangle, or is that pink triangle of honesty just sort of drifted off a bit? And it's good to be above the line, but what about striving for this? What about striving for excellence? And when we start to think about that, we have to come away from just the good or bad professionalism judgments, away from are you fit to practice or are you not fit to practice? Because within that, you are fit to practice. It's a huge range. And we can be encouraging people to strive for excellence and be more prepared for practice and better dentists. We also have to think about context, because we can all be a fish. We can all have a bad day. We can all have had something happen to us. Maybe we're suffering emotionally. Maybe there's been a bereavement, for example. We're not at our best. Maybe we're not as kind and empathetic as we could be. And maybe we have to look at patterns. So if it's low-level behaviour, is everyone in every situation saying you're a fish? Have you been told 20 times in a week, you're a fish, you're a fish, you're a fish? Has that come from 10 different people? Or is it just a one-off? And if it's a pattern, let's see what's going on here. And obviously, you can be a fish, a very big fish sometimes, and that needs picking up. But the point is we have to empower and educate our learners to strive to be this. This is what we should be all striving for. And that brings me nicely on to capability. And I'm going to use another analogy to talk about capability just to start with. I'm going to talk about being the Olympic female pole vaulting champion. I Googled this the other day, so it must be true, that the Olympic record is 5 metres and 5 centimetres currently for female pole vaulters. Now, how do we know if someone's ready, if someone's been training, how do we know they're ready to go to the Olympic Games and jump to a new Olympic record? You want them to jump to 5 metres and 6 centimetres. How do we know? Well, we could watch them pole vault, couldn't we? And that would be a way of doing it. We could watch them pole vault and say, yes, you're ready to go. But we don't know then, and they might not know, do they understand how the pole works? What if their pole gets lost in transit on the way to the Games? We might want to know, they might want to know, that they can go and choose another pole. They might need to know something about the engineering of the pole. They might need to know something about how to keep their muscles fit and healthy. They may want to know something about how to land so they don't break their legs. They may want to be able to work out their run-up for themselves. So there's an awful lot of things around doing the pole vaulting that we can also look for and that they can check that they know. They might also need to know that they can withstand the pressure of being at the Olympic Games. They might well be able to perform a 5 metre, 10 centimetre pole vault in the familiar surroundings of their training ground. But what about when the pressure's on? What about when the TV cameras are there? What about when there's the other competitors and the crowd? Maybe the humidity is different. You've also got to know whether they can do that. And thinking about all the other things that are around being able to pole vault, you start to realise there's an awful lot more about being prepared for practice and being a clinician. And we recently published our model of capability. So here is our iceberg of capability. Here's the iceberg behind you. Can't see it very well, I think, in the lights. And this is about doing in the real world. It's a wide variety of skills. It's on the ground, grounded in reality. Underpinning our capability are a huge number of integrated competencies, bringing together all the stuff that you do really well and integrating them. As well as that, it's bringing in all these additional skills and attributes. Now, these are all in the capability literature, but I would argue that pretty much everything you put on your Masterchef moment slide is valid here, and quite a lot of things that you suggested in the professionalism slide are important here as well. You have to bring in these additional qualities. So it's about integrating competence, bringing in these additional qualities to be able to do the job. And perhaps the most important thing about the capability model is that you're doing it. Here's global warming, here's the carving iceberg. You need to be able to adapt to ever-changing and unfamiliar circumstances. That's really difficult in assessment, isn't it? Because we tend to standardise everything. And maybe standardisation isn't helpful, because how do we ever help students or learners to know that they can do something in an unfamiliar environment? So maybe some of our assessment criteria should be, are able to demonstrate that they can do something even in an unfamiliar environment, even when something changes or something unexpected happens. Maybe we have to start being a bit creative with our assessment criteria and our learning objectives. Maybe we have to start debriefing students and saying, where were you, which competencies were you integrating there? Which skills did you bring? And actually, maybe more importantly, which skills did you need that you didn't bring, which might have helped you a bit more? And what could you do? How do you manage? You know, we all know at the moment, the NHS particularly, is a fast-changing platform for dentistry. How do we support our graduates to go out and work in that environment? If we're giving them standardised linear assessments, that is not going to make them prepared for the real world of practice. And that's why capability underpins preparedness. We talk about patient-centred care and person-centredness in health all the time. One of the ways that I particularly use person-centred care is through the use of hypnosis. It's a specific expertise of mine. I don't expect everyone to have it. It's helped me in some of the work I've done with special care patients and particularly challenging groups of patients. It's been an extra adjunct to enable me to be successful and support their patient care. And this is completely my very blunt idea of what comes into hypnosis. And I split it into two areas. The first is an understanding and awareness of the neurobiology, neurophysiology, neuropsychology of altered states of consciousness. And I'm certainly not going to get into a debate here this evening with Professor Banerjee here, who knows far more about this than I would. But that's one arm of hypnosis. The other is really advanced and effective communication. But underpinning both of those things is self-awareness. Self-awareness of the clinician, absolutely fundamental skill. And we're back to the individual. We're back to the importance of that individual understanding and being able to manage themselves and other people. I think if you teach communication skills and self-awareness, you're halfway to using some of the techniques and the philosophy of hypnosis, the philosophy of putting the person in the centre of their care, and equally the student in the centre of their learning. This is a patient who I treated in the school a little while ago, someone who had a very, very severe gag reflex. Now, you don't have to be a dentist to recognise that having a severe gag reflex probably makes dentistry pretty difficult. But this chap had a really severe gag reflex to the extent that sometimes when he was walking down the street, he would be gagging. He hadn't been able to see a dentist for over 20 years. He wasn't even able to brush his teeth at home very often. Through the use of hypnosis, we were able to work together, and I was able to empower him to come in and accept treatment. And we basically did a whole rehabilitation on him. But the most important thing about that was that he was able to go back to the student clinic and have the students treat him. Because it's no good if he can only come and see me, because I'm not going to be a dentist forever. Just telling you now, it might be 25 years, but I am going to retire at some point. It's no good. He's got to be able to do it for himself wherever he is and go and get the treatment that he needs. This is what hypnosis can do. So here is a picture of a fMRI scan of someone in hypnosis. And I'm not going to go into the depths of it and the intricacies of it this evening. But we can get repeatable patterns on scans that show what hypnosis is and how the brain is working in hypnosis. The same areas light up in people who have high hypnotizability. So it is a reproducible state. It is a brain state. And it's absolutely fascinating. I do a lot of training. I haven't written a lot about hypnosis, but I do a lot of training and I use it in my clinical work. And I'm an accredited member of the British Society of Clinical and Academic Hypnosis. And because perhaps I'm a glutton for punishment, tomorrow I'm not having a day off to get over the hangover, which I'm hopefully going to have in the morning. I'm going to run the annual conference for BISCA up in Dartington. So that's why I'm not around tomorrow. But it's about training and empowering not only the patients, but the next generation of clinicians to enable them to work with patients and develop person-centred care. And the other thing is I've just been appointed onto the Section Council of the Royal Society of Medicine, the Hypnosis and Psychosomatic section, for the same reason. Let's get the word out there. Let's get patient-centred care and preparedness for practice, and let's skill up our healthcare professionals so that they can go and deliver the care that the public deserve. I think that hypnosis brings the care to the cure, and it brings the humanity into patient care, dentistry and otherwise. Again, it's about a self-awareness, understanding self and others. And it's about empowering, supporting individuals to be able to do what they need or want to be able to do. In this case, that this chap could go and visit the dentist when he needed to, so he didn't have to get into the terribly sad state of his dentition where he was when he came to see me. And so those are the 4 areas that I just wanted to touch on this evening that I've been involved in for the last 12 years. And really, the importance of the individual shines through. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to end with a personal reflection about me as an individual and what I bring to dentistry, even though I didn't come from a traditional route into my studies. I just wanted to mention that we continue to support widening access and participation to dentistry, because this is about inspiring and supporting the most able but the least likely of our students to come and be the next generation of healthcare professionals across the board. Because surely that's the whole point of education, that the next generation's got to be better than us. That's what we're educating them for. And we've got to bring in those that are most able, but unfortunately, a lot of them are the least likely. So this is a personal reflection. So this will be a surprise to some of you. So I grew up on a farm. Sorry about the image quality. For those of you that are too young, this was actually a real photo on printed paper that I had to take a digital image of. But this is about 9 o'clock one summer's evening when we finished the bale cart. And look, here's the tray of squash, because everyone's great when I was at school. It was 9 o'clock at night, and I was thinking I might not have to go to school tomorrow because we've been bale carting really late, but often we were made to get up and go to school the next morning. And my sister's going to be delighted that I've put a picture of her up like that. So there you go, Rach. And we did a lot of riding, so I spent a lot of time riding. And this is my pen friend in America, and used to help out with the riding for the disabled. Why does that matter? Because I learnt a lot from this sort of non-traditional route. I learnt about taking responsibility for my animals and for looking after things and doing jobs. I learnt that on a miserable Saturday morning in November, I still had to get up and muck out the stable or clean the tack or, exercise the pony. I learnt about communicating with someone from a completely different community. Jen lived in California, and in the early 1970s, that was like wacky difference to living in the Cotswolds. And I learnt a lot about communicating, written communication, and doing riding for the disabled, an awful lot about humanity, caring, taking responsibility again, inclusivity, and celebrating difference rather than being frightened of it. So then we come to education. Apparently, I was never going to be an artist, so I went into science quite early. And this is my portrait of my mum when I was 3.5. I can only think that she was very angry. Anyway, I managed to get out of primary school, past the 11 plus, and this was my upper sixth at my school. It looks posh, doesn't it? It was a state school. I didn't go to private school. I passed the 11 plus, but our school was at Stratford-on-Avon. It was Shottery Manor. And we were only allowed in this building on special occasions, but of course we always had our photo taken in front of it because the school liked it. We had like a porter cabin over here somewhere that we had our lessons in. And my headmistress wanted me to take the Oxbridge exams and do medicine at Oxford or Cambridge, and I didn't want to take the Oxbridge exams, so I found a course they didn't do at Oxford or Cambridge, dentistry, and went to Bristol and studied dentistry instead. And when I got to Bristol, I was the only person in my hall of residence who had a grant. Everyone else came from private school. Everyone else knew each other from the lacrosse field or the private school or that whole, imposter syndrome-tastic set in. This is my friend Fee and I, when we just finished our A-levels, celebrating the end of school. As I say, I went off to university. And this is the class of 1993. I know some of you are watching online this evening. Sorry. And this is my friend Sarah and I. You can tell early on I had a bit of a passion for doing things differently. So our elective was with the Flying Doctors up the west coast of Australia. And we went out into Aboriginal communities. This was, I think, in Fitzroy Crossing. We did a project on something called juvenile periodontitis. Then that doesn't exist anymore because they've changed all the wording. But that's what we did. This was quite posh for what we did. We did one clinic out in the middle of the outback using the sun as our light. And the children had never seen a white person before, and they were desperate to show us their king brown snake. Now, their king brown snake was asleep in its hole, so they were poking it with a stick so that we could see it. I said, don't worry about it. It's fine. But what did I learn through my education? Again, putting myself in an uncomfortable, unfamiliar situation, learning to deal with things that were a little bit different and unfamiliar, learning to get along with people who I wouldn't have known otherwise, learning to communicate, learning a lot, obviously, of knowledge. Working hard. When I was at school, the school bus had to pick me up at 7:15 in the morning. It dropped me off at 5 o'clock at night, and I had an hour journey to and from school. I kind of learned that sometimes hard work's worth it. If you want what you get at the end, sometimes you just got to get on with it and suffer a little bit of discomfort and hard work. Which brings me on to work. Now, you might wonder why Prue Leith is featuring. Well, many years ago, when I lived at home, Mrs. Kruger, as she was known to be then, lived in the next village to us. And so from the age of 13, from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. every Saturday, I went and cleaned her house for her. And I was her Saturday girl. So I've done a lot of cleaning in that kitchen. It didn't look like that when I worked there, although that nice wooden Lazy Susan's always been a feature. I learned a lot in that kitchen. I did cleaning, washing, ironing. I cleaned a lot of toilets. I made beds. I waitressed at her dinner parties. I learned a lot about how the other half live, but I also learned a lot about how to communicate with them, how to manage expectations, how to listen, how to take direction. Also learned a lot about confidentiality when her famous people came to stay with her for the weekend and I had to, make their beds and look after them. You learn a lot about integrity when you work in a situation like that. And I think even though that's not the traditional thing we ask for in our interviews, and the people that come into dental school, we ask them if they've worked in a care home and if they've done their Duke of Edinburgh. I didn't do any of those things, but I did learn a lot of lessons from that non-traditional route, which I think have prepared me well for my career. I do some dentistry. I had to put some pictures of me doing dentistry. That's what I do. But you know what? We don't take many pictures of ourselves doing dentistry because we're a bit busy. First of all, we need to think about cross-infection and cleanliness, but also we're a bit busy actually doing the job. Say, oh, hang on, can you just take a picture? But there are a few, and this again was one. So I learned a lot. And this is when we opened a new dental access centre. When I worked in the community dental service, learned a lot. Used to run the domiciliary service for care homes and people with dementia, work a lot with people with advanced motor neuron disease and multiple sclerosis. I didn't feel prepared when I went into that job, and I really think it's massively important to prepare our students for that unfamiliar, unpredictable, non-standardised environment. And then as I went through, did a lot more dentistry, became an educator, took some students to conferences, massive room. That was a moment when I knew I had to present in that room. So it makes tonight feel tiny. It's brilliant. This was easy. And between leaving school and going to university, I was lucky enough to work at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. Again, take opportunities when they arrive. I got paid to work in the bookstall and got paid to do some ushering. And then if I stayed on, I was taken backstage for a whole season at the RST. Would look some props, costume, backstage. Amazing opportunity. Again, learning to communicate with different communities, learning to fit in an environment that's unfamiliar. So although they may not be traditional routes into dentistry, but they've given me things that have enabled me in my career to be prepared for practice. It's really important that you have a support network, and I'm really lucky. So you remember this picture. So this was Fee and I. So think back to January 2020, before the pandemic. If you can remember before that. January 2020, my birthday, before I got my PhD, before I even thought about becoming a professor, the first year in over 30 years that I had not received a birthday card from my friend Fee. Move on a couple of months to March, and actually the day that we had to send all our students home, and there's some students here this evening, and it's really lovely to have you here. Thank you for coming. We had to send them all home because of COVID. I learned that my friend had passed away. A couple of months later, I receive a parcel in the post. Her husband has been clearing out her things, and he's sent me some mementos that he thought I would like. You need this. You need people to believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself. And that's what we need our education to do for our learners. We need to give them that backing, that foundation of that they can do it. We need to give them confidence and self-efficacy. That's what exams don't give them, and that's why we have to educate beyond exams. So, to prepare for practice, I think you need these 4 elements that I've talked about this evening, and I've spent really the last 12 years of my career focusing and bringing those into curricula and teaching. We have to celebrate the individual and how each individual brings something unique, and we have to celebrate that, and we also have to recognise when something is missing to make it better. And we have to remember that preparing for practice is more than assessing for specific knowledge and skills. It's great if you can make spaghetti bolognese on a Friday night with your friends and family, and that is fantastic. But actually, you do have to be ready for your Masterchef moment. Could you click on the slide, please? You have to be ready for when the tech doesn't work. I could stand here for another 40 minutes and say thank you to a lot of people, but I'm not going to, because I think there's wine and nibbles waiting, and maybe we've got some questions. But I do want to say thank you to everyone that's come this evening, because you've given up your valuable free time to come and sit here and listen to me, and you've given your time at home to listen. So thank you very much. I'm truly grateful. I would also like to say thank you to every single student and every single patient that I've had the privilege to be part of their journey over the last however many years I've been doing dentistry and education. It's quite a lot. Without patients and without students, we're nothing, because that's what we're here for. And so I'd like to thank them. I would also like to thank Chris and Shubi for the welcome this evening, and I would also like to thank the tech team for everything they've done in setting this up, because they have made something that could be absolutely terrifying very, very easy. I'd also like to thank the photographer who took the massive headshot, because that was an uncomfortable experience, and he definitely was ready for his Masterchef moment. So thank you all very much for coming, and I would like to dedicate this evening to Philly.
Well done, Sally. Hello. Just like practicing how it works. Hello. Yeah. Sorry about this, Sally.
That's fine.
There you go, that's better. So, Sally, thank you for a wonderful talk and a wonderful inaugural lecture. It was fantastic, and a privilege to know you and be here. I've got a whole list of questions here, actually, which range from quite simple to quite difficult. So
Let's go with the simple, shall we?
Well, you won't like this. Where did you get those amazing shoes is what?
Yeah, I know. I know.
That's the simplest one I have.
Most important, yeah. House of Fraser, Pierre, what are they called? Yeah, I can't remember. Modo and Pele, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
That's the easy one. Now it gets harder, I'm afraid.
Oh,
so,
damn.
have you noticed any differences in student professionalism since the pandemic and lockdowns?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay.
No. I think in society we've noticed a change since the pandemic. I don't think it's just in our students, and I think it's wider than professionalism. I think it's a general change. In professionalism, certainly, I think there has been a change in maybe taking responsibility, but I don't think it's just in our students. I just want to point that out generally. I think as a society, we have struggled in the pandemic, some more than others, and so there are a lot more people suffering with mental health problems that maybe were just being able to be kept under the radar a little bit before the pandemic and now have come to the fore. One of the things I find interesting is now we've gone back to face-to-face teaching, some students forget they haven't got a mute button in front of them. So they're having a chat and they forget that I can hear them at the front. So yeah, that would be something. But yes, I think society as a whole has changed, and I think we've all changed. And I think that's why the need for capability is even more important, because those additional skills and qualities, we need to empower and we need to support our students to find those again, because I think some of them have been lost.
Thank you very much indeed. Next one, whilst leadership is context specific, how can we best prepare students for the huge diversity they will face in their likely many workplaces?
Well, I think that if you want to think about the outcomes of my PhD and the model, I think it's about recognising the community of practice you work in, wherever that is. And if you work in a number of places, recognise that each of those will be unique. I think it's about recognising this personal context or position, and that again, wherever you work, they may look slightly different. You know, in my work in practice, it was a dentist as individual, dentist as clinician, dentist as business person. If you're a dentist in a hospital, maybe the business person changes somewhat. Maybe what goes into that business person is something different. But I think it's about the individual having that capability and flexibility, understanding professional and personal identities, and being able to maintain and develop and sustain effective relationships. And I think that would support that diversity of context. But of course, you can't, in 5 years undergraduate dentistry, you can't prepare for every single eventuality. And that's why you have to skill people up so they can change themselves and adapt themselves, so they can learn adaptability and how to adapt. So yeah, I would say, understanding yourself, understanding the personal elements that go into leadership, and recognising the different communities of practice that you work in, however diverse they are, and celebrating that diversity.
Thank you. So the questions are flying here. So how should those in leadership in dentistry be changing NHS dentistry in England to enable those entering dental practice to be fulfilled and grow as professionals?
Well, that's a question. And if I had the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be standing here this evening. I would say really maybe an approach is to approach things a little bit like I approached the PhD, coming out and looking at what's actually happening in NHS dentistry in practice and learning from that, so that any change or any advice and any action is informed by what's actually happening on the ground, talking to practitioners, talking to patients, and actually being able to support change in a bottom-up approach. And that's what I would suggest is one way. At least then, if answers were unpopular, at least they could be explained or explored within the realities, and maybe practitioners would feel that they had a part in it, maybe had a voice in it, whereas at the moment I think practitioners feel that it's being done to them and it's a very top-down approach. But I'm afraid I don't have the answers to all of NHS dentistry at the moment.
Indeed. Right, next one. So you've talked about non-accredited learning in your presentation, soft skills. What systems do you use to measure success for these? Yeah, and that's really interesting, and we could have another few hours on the assessment of these skills. But like I said, I think we need to rely on non-linear methods. It's got to be more than tick box, black and white. It's got to involve self-reflection. It's got to involve some critical analysis. It's got to involve some individual exploration and demonstration. So it's maybe got to involve some mentoring, some conversations, some written reflective pieces, maybe debriefing, maybe some sort of team working sessions and debriefing. It's got to involve a whole range of activities that are not just, can you do this like this in a standardised environment? And we've got to give learners the opportunity to reflect and think and talk to enable change. So, but again, we could talk about assessment of, I hate calling them soft skills, we could talk about assessment of sort of non-linear and more complex areas, and we do for hours and hours and hours. Yeah, they're flying in here. So
great.
Should teaching of leadership and professionalism be prioritised over learning about the Krebs cycle?
What's the Krebs cycle? No, I don't mean that. No, in a word, we need. It's not either or; it's both and. Because if you remember from the capability, you've got to have those competencies. You've got to be able to integrate those individual competencies, and then add the additional skills and qualities. And of course, the difficulty is in a 5-year curriculum how you fit it all in, and that's where the skill of the team and the curriculum planning come in, because you have to find room for all of them. So no, it shouldn't be prioritised, but it should be both and, not either or.
Perfect. They get a bit harder now, I'm afraid. So,
I thought they were the hard ones.
So how can new graduates be nurtured and helped to develop after foundation training within the current NHS dental system? But the Chief Dental Officer, this is not me quoting this, by the way, says has run out of road.
By plane? I think that's difficult, but I go back to some of the things. The only way I can think about it is what I know and what I've been talking about. It's about supporting each individual to recognise their own abilities and skills, to recognise their own limitations. It's probably about having mentors, coaches, support systems in place individually, whether that's personal support systems or professional support systems, or accessing people that you pay to go and talk to, a coach or a counsellor. I think it's about supporting the individual, because everyone working in the NHS at the moment will be having a different experience. And after DFT, when sort of the formal support changes, it's very easy to be out in practice and be very isolated. So I think it's about making those connections and having those networks.
Another tricky one for you. So dental care is virtually non-existent on the NHS in the South West. It's got steadily worse over the last decade, despite many more students graduating from our university. As dental education is costly to the taxpayer, why don't dentists pay this back by working in NHS general dental practice?
Yeah, really great question. Actually, that's some of the research that we're carrying out at the moment into local recruitment and retention, and we've just started that piece of research. And the local dental committee have funded us to do another piece of research specifically about the South West, specifically about rural and coastal communities. So I don't quite have all the answers yet, but as well in the country, and Chris, you know this better than I do as Chair of Dental Schools Council, we are talking with Health Education England and CopDent about how we have some sort of platform whereby students will stay around, where they will be able to give back to the NHS from where they graduated from. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because we all live, well, most of us here, probably not all of us, live in the Southwest. So we would stay in the Southwest. But if you're a dental student and you get into a dental school far away from home, you want to go back home to where your network is. So the other thing that we're doing in Peninsula is trying to do some widening participation activities so that we recruit local students. So we recruit the local least likely but most able so that they perhaps will want to stay around the Southwest. But yeah, we're researching it. We hope to get some answers and get some help quite soon. But yes, it's a really difficult situation.
Thank you. Next one, what do you think about the term client, which seems to be increasingly used instead of patient?
I don't think I have a huge opinion about it, because I think that professional therapeutic relationship is not built on the semantics of the words you use. I think it's about attitude. In the same way that if someone speaks to me with respect, I don't expect all my students to, bow down and lick my feet and call me Professor Hanks. Maybe some. Because I think if you've got that professional relationship, the semantics are less important. I think if the semantics become a culture and client becomes a culture rather than patient, patient care is different to client care. But it is the same when you bang up the philosophy of healthcare and the philosophy of business together. And it's been an issue really for as long as you've had private dentistry. And it comes back to the professionalism and those financial considerations, and it's very complex. So I think, again, it really depends on how the term client is used and what the attitude towards the word is and how the patient/client sees themselves, how they feel looked after. Do they feel that they're being cared for? So I think it's probably about the actual work that's done, the actual relationship rather than the semantics. But I do see that sometimes the semantics can give a different colour on things that might actually also affect that relationship, that therapeutic relationship. I think it's about what your attitude is to the work you're doing for patients, whether you think you're caring for them. I also think that there's it comes back to, are you doing elective treatments? Are you doing cosmetic work? Are you doing Botox, fillers, teeth whitening? Or are you improving oral health care for your patients? And, my bag is special care. I've worked with patients who needed me to maintain their general health. And so for me, that's what's important. There are other members of the profession that do things that support patients or clients in other ways. So I just think it's about what it means in that specific context.
Great, get a bit easier now. So what's been your proudest moment in dentistry?
Oh, wow, that's probably tonight. It's pretty much up there, I have to be honest. I think one of my proudest moments in dentistry was when I realised I made a difference. And it was setting up the Dental Access Centre and setting up some of the pathways for care I set up in Bath and North East Somerset around looking after and supporting the health of patients that really needed it. And coming out of care homes, knowing I'd made an enormous difference to residents and their families in the care I provided. But genuinely, I think being able to look back on my career as I've been given the privilege to do this evening, and talk to everyone that's given up their time. That's got to be up there pretty much.
Great. Do you think professionalism can make you a more selfish person?
A more selfish person?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess there's always that opportunity for anything to make you more selfish or more self-centered, but I think there's a difference between being self-aware and self-centered and selfish, and I think that's about recognizing that. And if you're self-aware enough to not be selfish, then it's not going to make you more selfish. And if you are selfish, maybe you need a bit more self-awareness. And now I've confused everyone, you're all hypnotised, so brilliant. How about wine?
Perfect, right. You can read that one out, Sally. That's from, there you go. If you don't want to read that one out, okay, that's fine. Two more, we'll do two more, then we'll stop. So what's been the biggest challenge in your career to date?
One of the biggest challenges in my career to date was actually being part of setting up a new service in Gloucestershire for the community dental service, and setting up in the new hospital in Morton-in-Marsh, which is near to where I grew up. And it was one of the reasons that I moved across to academia, with the hope that I could get somewhere to make a difference, because we were setting up a new clinic for patients with special needs. Many of my patients were wheelchair bound, and they set this new surgery up on the second floor of the hospital, and the lifts weren't big enough for the wheelchairs, and there were no hoists, there were no wheelchair tippers. And I fought and fought in meetings to say, we've got to make this accessible. And the answer was they can go to Gloucester. Well, Gloucester's 30 miles away, whatever, but it's a long trip if you have additional needs. And that was a really difficult moment. And that was the moment that I left the NHS full-time clinical work and went into academia so that I could perhaps try and make a difference later on.
Thank you very much indeed. And the last one, from the students, how can they get involved with trips to Peru?
Well, organise it, sort it out, come and see me and ask me to come and help out, and I'll tick the box. It is, this particular group of students sorted it all out for themselves and came to me and said, would you come with us? Would you be the person that comes with us? It is about sometimes taking opportunities when they come your way, and sometimes it's about looking for opportunities. It wasn't paid for, it was self-funded. They had to do a lot of fundraising to get the trip. It was a competitive process to be the group of students that went on the boat. So it was actually a lot of hard work. So sometimes I think it's about looking for opportunities, finding them and taking them, even if it's hard work.
Perfect. Thank you very much. A beautiful way to finish. So, Sally, congratulations. Very well done indeed. Big round of applause for Sally.